Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's user drop-in session. In this morning's session, we're going to be looking at how to make processes look good, or really, I want to get you to think a little bit about how your processes should be presented or displayed to other people. And I've got a few examples that I'll work through or show you, and also look at some of the features and functionality that we'd use to do this. So I think for some of you here, this is probably going to be fairly familiar ground, but I hope in terms of thinking about layouts and so on, we can sort of bring something a bit new, or maybe slightly different perspective to how you work and use SCORE. So I'm going to share the screen. Everybody should be able to see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so as I said, what I've done here is I've taken a process example, and then I've actually prepared it in slightly different views, so you can sort of see different ways you might display it. But the thing that I've said for years, through years and years of training people to do process mapping before we had SCORE, and process mapping with SCORE since, is whatever you're doing, you should always think about what's the message that you're trying to get across. So you really have to think about who is the particular audience, what's the particular context or situation that you're working in, and what is that message that you're trying to get across to that particular audience. And what I've done is, in my examples, I've taken some sort of very broad brush strokes in terms of buckets of types of audiences or situations. So there's often a lot of kind of nuances within this, but hopefully I can sort of then explain the different pieces in it. But when I talk about the story that you're trying to tell at a very high level, it could be anything from, look, are we just trying to understand what's happening today? Is there like a misunderstanding within the team? Do we have a lack of understanding about how a particular thing works? And therefore, this is all about us just getting together, having a conversation, and really making sure that we're all aligned on something. Or is it that you're doing a piece of investigation work, and therefore actually nobody really knows what's going to come out of it until we do it? It might be that we have a feeling that something doesn't work, or actually things work okay, but we want to do things differently, or we want to improve in some way, and we're just investigating to find out what that is. And therefore you may be wanting to think about, how do you present what we found? Or you might be thinking about how we present what we want to do in the future, or what we're proposing. What are our recommendations? And so already now I've talked about three different situations. One is a simple, are we aligned? What should our process look like in that situation? Another one is, what have we found and that we want to show people? The third one I mentioned there is, what are we recommending we do? What does the future look like? And again, that's another way of presenting processes. And then I've got a final one here, which is a fourth one, although I've only got 3 boxes on the screen. And that's about, actually, we might be presenting this as documentation. So it could be that we need to document our processes, so we've got a standard way of describing how things work. It could be that we're using it for training or maybe onboarding material. And again, that's another context that might have a slightly different way of how you present the information. So I'm going to start at the beginning, and I've called it here capture. And this is really the scenario where we just need to get people in the room, get them aligned. This is often what the output of a workshop might look like. Okay, it's that getting people together and talking about the process. Now, in this case, you'll see I've got the process I'm using here. The example I've used throughout this actually is the same one, and that's the expenses process. And I'm sure you'll know from experience, when you sit down with a group of people, if you're following our 5-step approach, where you start with the title and the scope, and then you start by looking at your activities, you chuck a bunch of boxes up under the screen, everyone says stuff, you move the boxes around, they end up in a slightly different order. Then you start putting your Y boxes, but then they change because through discussion you move them around. People come up with suggestions, thoughts, ideas, challenges, and so your process ends up often a little bit messy with your note boxes annotating in different places. You've got attachments where you've captured things that people have said here, like templates are stored on the Z drive. But actually that's okay, because it's in that environment, it's all about the conversation. So actually having it a bit messy, that's fine. And often processes that people are describing to you are a bit messy. So having them look a bit messy on the page, it again tells a bit of a story. So you again, you'll be familiar with the alignment tools. So if I drop into edit mode, for example, if I want to align all of my boxes, I can select boxes on a particular line. I can use the arrangement tool, go align tops. It's going to push them all up to the top one there. But I can start to tidy stuff up very quickly and easily. And sometimes it's appropriate to do this in a workshop type environment. My recommendation, or certainly my approach, maybe not so much a recommendation, is actually leave it a bit messy, because it is much more natural. There'll always be somebody in the room who go, "Can you just line those boxes up?" And if that question comes up, then fine, I'll do it. But actually having it that bit messy sort of helps to tell the story. Now, the other thing I would say, I do want to pick up on this particular example, is about the layout of the boxes and the order and where you position them on the screen. So although they are a bit messy, you will notice that the way that I naturally map a process is very much the way I'd write. So it's top to bottom, left to right. I always start on the top left, I map across, and when I get to the end, I circle back round and then follow the next row. Now, that's one style of mapping. Another approach would be to just keep mapping to the right hand side, to keep mapping out in a big long straight line. You'll know from using SCORE that there's no restriction. You can absolutely do that if you want to. The other alternative, and one we see sometimes, not as often, is top to bottom. So actually mapping the process down. So you're going from the top of the screen and then you keep mapping down and down and down. And again, SCORE doesn't restrict you from doing that. Now, the reason that I do it top to bottom, left to right, and the way we tend to recommend that is because it's much easier to fit the process on the screen at one time. And if you're in a workshop environment or a conversational environment, one of the benefits of visualizing process, and one of the key benefits, is that everybody can see what's been said and what's agreed. And that prevents circular conversations and covering old ground and talking about the same things over and over again, because you can see that it's already been discussed on the screen. The problem, if you start mapping off what's visible on the screen, whether it's left to right or top to bottom, is that people can then forget what's on there and you find yourself sort of scrolling around the page. So that's the main reason why I tend to use that top to bottom, left to right, because I want to try and keep as much as I can on the screen at any one time. The only other thing I would say is if you do take that approach where you're either going all the way along, left to right or top to bottom, I have found just through experimentation testing that top to bottom tends to be better. And that's purely because it's easier for most people to scroll up and down than it is to scroll left and right on the screen. So people are looking at the process afterwards. So that's just a quick one on the sort of the actual mapping exercise. So it always ends up a bit messy, and that's fine. And you can go away and tidy it up afterwards. So let's now move to the present piece. And this is where we're presenting information back. And here I've actually done two different versions of so it's the same process, but I've started here with the as is at the top. And I've said, you know what, it's exactly the same process, but I've tidied it up a little bit to make it easier for people to read. So visually the process flows, the boxes are all lined up. I've followed the same convention in terms of left to right, top to bottom in my layout, but just tidied everything up and lined it up. Now, the other thing that I've done here is, again, you remember all those annotations? So what I've done is I've just changed them slightly because I want to highlight particular issues. For example, here, I want to highlight the fact that people are accidentally they're accidentally overwriting the template on the drive. So I've changed the color of the note box. I've made it pink to stand out, and I've used an icon. You'll also notice that I've actually positioned the note box behind the What box so that it's sort of surrounding it but not blocking it. And I've also added a little icon onto the front of the box, just again to show in this case, and this is something that we see commonly, where spreadsheets get overused in a process, creates duplication, it slows things down, and is open to errors. So again, I here have used the icon to highlight all the different steps that rely on a spreadsheet to get done. So how do I do this? Well, Notebox is just a standard notebox that I've, I can open the panel on the left, standard notebox that I've dragged on or used the N plus click to add onto the canvas. You double click on it, and I've just used one of the standard colors in the background, the fuchsia there. That makes the box color that pink. The icons, so if I wanted to use my warning icon, I go in here, type warning symbol comes up there. So again, remember, I can either drag the icon onto the canvas like that, and what it does, it puts it into a What box with the little short code there. Or I can click once on the icon, you'll see a little message comes up saying the short code has been copied to clipboard. And that means I can then go and double click on my note and paste it in there. Now, the other thing you see is the way I've put the note behind the box. And just to show you how I did that, it's quite simple. So I drag the box over, the note box over the What box, click the note box so it's highlighted, then go to Arrange and click.
Thank you very much.
Is that better? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, showed how to put the note box behind the What box, showed how to drag the icon onto the canvas, and then I've just positioned the icons on it in front of each box. Of course, you can put them anywhere you want, but it's just the way I've showed it. So again, just a reminder, the purpose of this is when I'm presenting back to someone to say, look, we went and mapped the process, we asked people what was wrong with it, and this is what we found. So we've sort of laid it out neatly and then highlighted the potential issues that could be fixed. So also on here, I've done another version of this process, but this time I've got a 2B version. And in this case, what I've done is simplified the process, because what we're doing is we're looking at it going, okay, what if we were to add a new system or automate this particular process? So again, you'll see that there's less boxes, so the process is simpler. In this case, I've used the same approach in terms of highlighting the changes this time. So we're saying, look, we're going to use a mobile app to create expenses record. We're going to automate this, so when the user takes a photograph of the receipt, we're going to use some clever OCR software to try and actually assign those as items onto the expense report. We're actually going to build in some automatic checking based on the policy, so we take away a lot of that burden, and it's only if there's an issue that it drops then to the line manager. So actually what we're doing is we're saving a lot of time, reducing risk of errors and so on in the process. So you can see exactly the same approach this time, simplified the process, but then I've just used icons and notes just to sort of highlight the changes to the process. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back up to the top. And then finally, the last sort of use case, if you like, is that I was talking about, is actually when we then want to present it or use it as a sort of formal documentation, whether that's for training material or whatever. Now here, what I've decided to do actually is to keep it very, very simple. So again, it's the same process as my 2B one, but I've taken away all the highlights from it. You could do, if you wanted to, use icons as well. We do see people using icons, especially if even in your like today process, you've got things like telephone calls or emails. It sometimes helps to use an icon to sort of just show that that's a telephone call or an email or whatever. But my preference is generally to try and keep these as simple as possible, because people are dipping in and out of them to just say, okay, I just need to check my understanding of this process, or check that we're doing something that we think we're doing, or we should be check that what we should be doing with the process. So for me, it's always about keeping it simple. So actually taking away a lot of the other stuff we've put in. It might not look as pretty, but actually it's about being functional and easy to use and accessible for people. So again, keep it very simple. The only other thing that I would, though, propose doing is then when it becomes documentation, is thinking about what other information do people require to execute these steps. So in this case, you then start to use the attachments. So when you're in your kind of workshop mode, you're actually using attachments to capture all of that extra notes. What are the things people are saying? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities, the risks, and so on? But at this point, you want to be thinking about only providing information that's relevant to people following the process. And my examples here are quite simple, but here it might be, I've got a link. I've added a link. So when I look at this step, start new expenses record, I could actually link to the system. So I could go and go to that page or launch that myself. It might be that I just want to remind people what the expenses policy actually is. So again, I could link off to that where it's stored in a document library somewhere else. You can add other things. For example, here these two examples, I've just used a URL link. So you write the text you want to display and you put the link. Or you could add other types of information. So again, a lot of examples we've seen where people actually embed videos or images or other information just to help users in terms of executing that particular step. So adding a video, generally it'd have to be hosted somewhere. So it might be on YouTube, for example, Vimeo, or images. I think it just wants a link to the image stored somewhere. Or you can actually use the standard shortcodes and things for adding images as well. So in the text field, I forget what the shortcode is off the top of my head, but you could use I think it's like an exclamation mark, and then you type image and then the number of the image or something like that. I'm not sure this one will actually work because I don't think I've got it right. But those shortcodes that you would use on the process diagram, for example, to do something. No, that didn't work. But those shortcodes could easily can be added to the text fields there as well. So that can be quite useful, as I say, for helping people providing more information following the